So we've had infinite beginningless lifetimes, and in all those lifetimes, we've existed in relationship with other sentient beings. And especially in the desire realm, we're really dependent on other living beings just to stay alive. We really can't manage on our own. And anyway, I don't think most people would want to live in a frozen ice cube unrelated to other living beings. Especially as human beings, we're very social animals. And so really contemplating, that's our state of depending on others and wanting to live in relationship with them and having to live in relationship with them. And so we might as well make it a good relationship, a peaceful relationship, one that is mutually beneficial. And that involves a change in attitude for us. Instead of seeing other living beings as hassles, as objects we have to walk around in order to get where we're going, or as people to use for our own pleasure, for our own ego advancement. So all that way of relating to sentient beings that we might have a lot of strong conditioning in, we have to really let go of. And instead replace it by seeing that other living beings are exactly like us, wanting happiness, not wanting suffering. So that means a couple of things. One is looking deeply into other living beings' heart and recognizing their humanity, no matter who they are or how they treat us or what they do. So even the people that we may feel threatened by or the people we may judge just upon seeing them, to look past that, the superficial appearance, past our own judgments, which are simply created by our own mind, and instead look into people's hearts. So that's necessary to see how we and others are the same. And another thing that's necessary is to drop this idea that somehow we're more important than them, that our happiness is definitely more important than others. Our pain needs to be stopped before theirs. So these are difficult attitudes to change. So we've had quite a self-centered mind for a very, very long time. And then our whole environment encourages it. It's really only when we come to the Dharma that we hear another viewpoint. So let's try and reformat our mind, so to speak, to repeatedly thinking about these things. And then build on that so we can really cherish others and have the inspiration and aspiration and joyous effort to work for their benefit. And then having that intention to benefit them be the motivation for our progressing along the path to full awakening. Yeah, so it's really quite amazing how our whole culture just encourages that view of look out for yourself and basically, use people for your own advantage. I saw one article that was entitled something to the effect of, how to get the most out of college. And I thought, oh, okay, I have a nephew in college, and two nephews in college. Let's see what it says. Maybe I should send the article to them. And the guy started out, who's writing it, by saying, people worry so much about getting into college, and you've got to, really work on your CV and do all these extracurricular activities and get good grades. And the most important thing is to get into a good college. And, how the young people have so much stress to get into a good college and make the grade and, perform on the interview and so on and so forth. And he was saying, that's not the purpose of going to college. Just forget about all of that. And I thought, oh, well, that's refreshing. Maybe he'll talk about what I think you should, do when you go to college. Yeah, because also in it he said this is something like this is a transition time in your life. You can really explore, and I thought, yeah, that's what I would want to tell all the college students. Just you can get to know so many different people and hear so many different ideas and explore all sorts of things that you've never heard of before and learn things from other people by hearing from them directly instead of by reading a book. And I thought, this is what he's going to say. And he said, that he's done surveys because he works in this field sometimes. And what the students say has been most valuable to them in college is to have mentors, to meet mentors. And I thought, oh, that's good. If you use college to get some good mentors and direction in your life. And then he said, because those mentors, they will put you in contact with all sorts of other people who will help you be in contact and get accepted for this and that and do this and that. And it turned into a whole thing of how you can make connections with people who have power and status by having a mentor, and by making connections with all these people with power and status, then you are setting yourself up for a very successful career because you know all these people already from when you're in college. And I thought, no, that's not how to go to college and really benefit, to go to college and have that idea of, everybody I meet, I want to, the people who are important for me to get to know are the people I can use. That's basically what it is, Who can I use to advance my career? And I thought, that's so sad. Yeah, that's so sad because already, from so young, people just, geared on, I've got to be this, and having some concrete idea of who they've got to be, even though they don't even know if they want to be that or not. Yeah. And then using other people to actualize the image of what you think success is. And it's like, that's not a recipe for success. That's a recipe for loneliness, alcoholism, abuse, becoming Paul Manafort. That's what that's, if you have that idea, that's the kind of person you're going to become. And then you'll wind up, with a court case against you because, you don't care about other people. You just care about using them for your own advantage or your own advancement. And, and I was so disappointed in that article, because this was advice on how to go to college and really benefit, and it wasn't teaching them how to benefit at all. Okay, and just seeing, how from such a young age, what we're taught is how to use other people. And so if we wish to have the bodhicitta mind, we've got to forget about using other people. Okay, that's not, looking at people and thinking, what can I get out of them, is not going to lead us to bodhicitta at all. We've just got to look at people and see them as sentient beings with good qualities and suffering from all the afflictions and the dukkha or unsatisfactory conditions of samsara and wanting to benefit them. That's it. Not all this other stuff. But it takes a lot of work on our own mind to undo these kind of imprints that we've had for so long from, family, society, and so on. Yeah. So it might be a good thing to spend some time contemplating and thinking, who do I use? Who do I look at with an idea, with the thought of what can I get from them? How can they benefit me? Yeah, I think it takes some courage to ask ourselves that question. Yeah, what do you think? Yeah, it's not a nice thing to admit, but it's there. We might as well admit it, and then we can do something about it. We're in chapter 2, called The Buddhist View of Life. Okay, so chapter 1 was the introductory chapter, really placing Buddhism, in terms of how it relates to science, to other faiths, to secular culture, and so on. And now we're going to get into the Buddhist view of life. And His Holiness, now when he used to give courses in the West and teach the Dharma for several days, he would always start out with what's contained in this chapter. And now also, when he teaches in Dharamsala, the short teachings for 2, 3, 4 days that are sponsored by foreign groups, he often starts out teaching this. And he really jumps in, especially I remember sitting in auditoriums in New York and so forth with people who were brand new to Buddhism. And His Holiness is talking about the nature of mind and emptiness and all this kind of stuff. Yeah, but that's because he wants people to get the Buddhist worldview, and he wants people to see that Buddhism is not about just blind faith and devotion and praying, but that Buddhism is really about using your mind to understand how how your own mind works and how life works, and advancing your knowledge and your insight and your abilities. Okay, so he doesn't start things out with all sorts of devotion stuff. And it was interesting, in previous years when he would teach in the West and also in India, because the tradition is to start with a lot of prayers. And we'd usually do like a good half an hour of prayers before he would teach, especially when he was giving Lamrim teachings. Yeah, I would say 20 minutes, half an hour, just of prayers. Because it actually says in one of the Lamrim teachings that the prayers make your mind open and receptive to hearing the teachings. But in recent years, again, His Holiness has shortened all the prayers, really shortened them, because he says we don't have much time together and it's more important for you to hear the teachings. Okay. So this is his approach, yeah. And so he also doesn't expect everybody in the audience to understand everything the first time they hear it. He realizes that a lot of these are difficult topics, especially if you grew up in a different culture and you've never thought about this stuff or heard about it before. So he doesn't expect everybody to come out and saying, I understand that perfectly and I believe it completely. What he really wants is for people to think, and look deeply and examine and investigate. Okay. Because a lot of these things we have to keep coming back to again and again and again. Yeah. It's not like you hear it and then, hallelujah, It is crystal clear to me how rebirth works. Yeah. No, it's not like that. Okay, so he starts this chapter off. Our mind determines our state of existence. Whoa, how about sock it to us at the first sentence? Someone with a mind stained by afflictions is a being in samsara. Someone, or cyclic existence. Someone who has eradicated all afflictive obscurations, mental afflictions, and the karma causing rebirth in samsara, is a liberated being, an arhat. Someone whose mind has eliminated even the subtlest cognitive obscurations is a Buddha. So this is determined by the extent to which that person's mind has been purified. Yeah, so your status, if you're a common being, if you're an Arya, if you're an Arhat or a Bodhisattva or a Buddha, it all depends on the level of your mind. Yeah, it doesn't depend through signing up and going through how to be an Arya 101 and doing the reading and passing the exam at the end of the semester. That's not how it goes, okay? So quite different. Dharma education is very different than secular education. Yeah, we're not, in Dharma education, our aim isn't to stuff people with knowledge, and it isn't to give them vocational training so they can get a job. Mm-hmm. And that's what regular education is about. Yeah? So that people have knowledge, lots of facts and figures, and they have training so they can earn money. Dharma education, that's not the purpose for Dharma education. Yeah? Purpose of Dharma education is to transform your mind and help you be a happier person by progressing on the path to awakening. Yeah, so very, very different style of education. And it's interesting, when Westerners start Dharma education, we have in mind the structure from our secular education, I want the curriculum for the first year and the curriculum for the second year. Tell me the topic of each of the talks. Tell me when we have a quiz. Tell me when we have a final exam. What percentage of the final exam points do I need to have in order to pass the course? And how many points do I need to become an Arya, to become a Bodhisattva, and to become a Buddha? And can I speed up my education a little bit and take more than one course at the same time so that I can graduate earlier and become a Buddha earlier, because I'm really have a lot of things to do and I want to get this over and done with. Right? That's not it. And yet we come in with that kind of mind because that's what we grew up in, isn't it? Yeah, that's what we grew up with. And in secular education, we have to compete with all the other students because only certain students can get A's, so we have to compete with them and score better than them. And we have to win the teacher's favor, and we have to take home our report cards and show them to our parents, or at least to our Dharma friends, to prove how, we're advancing, we're on level 2 of the path. Yeah. Or level 3 of the path, and isn't that good? And you're on only level 1. Oh, poor you. I can tutor you. It's like that's how we approach it, and that is so far from what Dharma education is. Yeah. When she came to the Abbey, you want to tell the story? Oh, I don't know. Just make up a story. Yeah.
I don't know. I guess, I wrote many curriculums and sent them to Venerable Children because we didn't have one. So I was like, we should have one. I have all these old documents,
Yeah.
4-year programs, what we have now and what it could look like. And she never replied to any of my emails.
Yeah. And she was quite adamant that we really need this. Otherwise, people would not learn the Dharma.
No, I don't think so. It was that people would not recognize that we are a legit institution.
Oh, that's it. Forget about learning the Dharma.
Yeah.
We don't care about them learning the Dharma. We care about our status as a legitimate institution for Dharma education. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so, wherever we are on the path, this is determined by the extent to which that person's mind has been purified. In this regard, the Sublime Continuum, which is the Tibetan title is Gyu Lama, or the Sanskrit title is Uttara Tantra, or Ratna Gotra Vibhanga. Okay? Because I think in the Chinese usually call it Ratna Gotra Vibhanga and the Tibetans Uttara Tantra, but it's the same text. Anyway, that text speaks of 3 types of beings: polluted beings who revolve in cyclic existence, unpolluted beings who do not revolve in cyclic existence, and completely unpolluted beings who are Buddhas. A person's level of spiritual attainment does not depend on external features, but on his or her state of mind. Okay, so it doesn't depend on whether you wear robes or not. It doesn't depend on the color of your donka. Our donka is this one, It doesn't depend on whether you have titles or not. It depends on the state of your mind. Although we can practice the Buddhist meditation and apply its psychology to our lives without becoming Buddhists, Understanding the Buddhist worldview is essential to glean the full impact of the Buddhist teachings. Okay, so we can benefit from the Dharma, learning whatever helps us. But if we really want the full impact of the teachings, then we really have to do it within the context of understanding the worldview, understanding what mind is, understanding rebirth, these kinds of things. In this chapter, we will investigate some of the most important aspects of the Buddhist worldview: the nature of the mind, the self, the four truths of the Aryas, dependent arising and emptiness, and the possibility of ending suffering. Yep, all in chapter 2, all of that. Okay, His Holiness is, I'm going to give it to you, he says. Okay, so the first section says, what is mind? Modern science focuses principally on gaining knowledge about the external world of matter. Scientists have developed sophisticated tools to manipulate even subatomic particles and have created instruments to measure minute changes in the chemical and electrical states of neurons. It's really quite amazing what scientists have developed. You know, when you think of it, I can't do that. I can't measure the chemical and electrical states of neurons or, manipulate subatomic particles. It's really quite impressive. Okay. We now know about stars light years away from Earth and tiny organisms that our eyes cannot see. While science has made great strides in understanding the external world, matter, and its subatomic components, it has not given as much attention to the inner world of mind, consciousness, and experience. Science lacks a cohesive concept of mind, its nature, causes, and potential. And while there are many books about the anatomy and physiology of the brain, the mind is rarely mentioned. Yeah, if you Google brain, tons of material. If you Google mind, I don't know, you don't get a lot that's if you get other things, but science doesn't really know very much about what to say about mind. And so the scientific tools that we have are capable of measuring things that are matter, either subatomic particles, huge bodies in the cosmos. So the tools are designed specifically to measure things that consist of matter. They don't have scientific tools to measure the brain, to measure the mind. They have scientific tools to measure the brain, but the mind isn't the brain. Okay. So here science is kind of limited when it comes to things that have the nature of clarity and cognizance, whereas they're very advanced for measuring, for understanding the things that have the nature of matter, external objects, things like that. Also, it's interesting that scientists like data that can be measured in terms of external things that happen. And first-person accounts are not very highly valued. They're kind of dismissed as being subjective. Yeah. Whereas in Buddhism, first-person accounts have a lot of value because you can't measure the mind with instruments that measure matter. Okay, nowadays many people who think about the mind explain it in terms of material phenomena. Neurologists portray it in terms of the actions of neurons, especially those in the brain. Behavioral psychologists describe it by referring to a person's deeds and speech. So that's interesting, isn't it? Scientists, they want to talk about mind, they talk about neurons, okay? Behavior psychologists, if you want to talk about mind, you talk about speech and body actions. Yeah? Cognitive scientists study perception, thinking, and mental processes in terms of external measurable behavior and brain activity. So that's how all those things about mind are understood, by, things that can be measured, external phenomena that can be measured. The difficulties with these models is that they do not give us any means to accurately or deeply understand experience. Scientists may tell us about the neural events in the brain, the hormonal reaction that accompanies compassion or anger, and people's behavior when they are angry. But this does not convey what these emotions feel like, what the experience of them is. Other people speak of the mind as an immaterial, permanent self or spirit, okay, like a soul. But they too are not able to suggest tools to observe consciousness. The Buddhist teachings may be considered a science of mind in that they provide a complete study of the mind, setting forth specific means for observing it, delineating the various types of consciousness and mental factors, and making known the mind's potential and describing ways to transform the mind. So that's pretty vast. Yeah, kind of a complete study of what the mind is when you think about it. Yeah, I mean, can science talk about the potential of the mind? So the nature of mind is not material. It lacks the tangible qualities of physical objects. While mind and brain are related and affect each other when a person is alive, the mind is distinct from the physical organ of the brain, which is matter and can be investigated with scientific instruments that measure physical events. Okay, the mind is what experiences. It is what makes an organism sentient. Okay, when we talk about sentient beings, it means a being with consciousness who is not a Buddha. Yeah. Those of us who have sat with the body of a deceased loved one know that while his or her brain is still there, something else is missing. What is no longer present is the mind, the agent that experiences what life presents and is the essential differentiating factor between a corpse and a living being. So Venerable Semkei very articulately talked about this in the last week in talking about the death of her sister and what it was like to have this idea of her sister as a living being and then being in the hospital and all there was a corpse, and the corpse resembled how she remembered her sister to be, but the corpse was totally lacking her sister. The corpse was a bunch of vegetable goo. That's it, that it was cremated, right? Yep. And it's cremated, recycled in nature, yeah. But where is Jane? Not in those atoms and molecules, And so that whole experiential part of her sister, the whole part of us that cognizes and feels and experiences and thinks and so forth, that is not made of anything material. And we can't pin it down and hold it there and control it and make it stay there and do what we want. Yeah. When we're alive, the body and mind have a relationship with each other, and death is simply the severing of that relationship. Yeah, that's all it is. The continuity of mind goes on to another life. And we've all died many, many times. Yeah. So we tend to be afraid of death, but when you think, been there, done that many times, yeah. So it's not really death itself that is so scary. It's a death that we can't control. Or a rebirth that we can't control. Okay, so really, that's why it's so valuable, if you have the opportunity to be around people who who die, and to really see, something's there and then something's gone. But materially, the same body is there, but the person is not there. Yeah. Buddhism has a 2,600-year history of investigating the mind. Many treatises about the mind were written in ancient India, where the Buddha lived, as well as in countries to which Buddhism has spread throughout the centuries. In recent years, fruitful dialogue between Buddhists and scientists has begun, and I have great interest in seeing how this dialogue develops and the positive contributions to the well-being of sentient beings that it will produce. Okay, so His Holiness is very interested in this dialogue of science with scientists. And it started out in the 80s, very modestly. One man got together a few scientists and took them to Dharamsala, and they talked with His Holiness for a few days. And, and now there's, many groups and projects and institutions that have evolved from this, that are studying the relationship between the mind and the brain, that are studying and even making, curricula for schools about how to teach children compassion, having summer institutes where they have scientists come and learn meditation. Now in the monasteries, Drepung built a huge facility for scientists to come, and they have laboratories, and there's this ongoing summer science course, and now they're having some monks who are have been trained enough that can teach other monks in science. We have a friend who's a physicist, and she goes and she's been teaching the monks and the nuns in India over the summer. It's just exploded on both sides in terms of the Buddhists learning science and what the scientists learning about Buddhism. And then, branching off from there, they have a whole thing called contemplative science now, and, studying what contemplation means and all this kind of stuff. Okay, so it's really something that's taken off. And I think, one of the reasons His Holiness probably has several reasons for being interested in this. One is he's a person who loves to learn new things, and he's curious about new things. So I think that's, what started it all. And also, he's aware that in Western society, if scientists are interested in something, and if scientists can reach conclusions regarding things that the Buddha said 2,500 years ago, it makes people in society more interested in learning the Dharma. Okay, and then the Dharma ceases to seem like some foreign thing, like a foreign religion, and it becomes more like a study of mind with techniques for developing a kind heart and so on. And so nowadays, I think we talked about this in chapter 1, he talks about Buddhist science, Buddhist philosophy, and Buddhist religion. And so he's really keen on Buddhist science and Buddhist philosophy being taught very widely in the world. And then he says, Buddhist religion, that's our business. Okay, you don't need to get involved in that. But of course, Buddhist religion is based on the cosmology and the philosophy. Okay, but you can study the first two without the religious part. And so he's very keen for people to, in terms of the body of knowledge that people now have access to, he really wants to see the, the great Indian philosophers, their contribution be available to people from all sorts of different cultures. Yeah. So every topic in this series relates to the mind. We will look at the mind from many perspectives: its nature, causes, potential, functions, levels, and so on. We will investigate what obscures its potential and how to cultivate the antidotes to these obscurations so as to reveal the potential of the mind in its wondrous glory that we call full awakening or Buddhahood. The Sanskrit word translated as mind may also be translated as heart. This is what I was talking about yesterday. From a Buddhist perspective, expressions like he has a kind heart or her mind is very intelligent both refer to the same entity, the conscious, experiential part of a living being. Although our mind is right here with us at this very moment, and we use it all the time, we don't understand it very well. It's really true, isn't it? Yeah. And the same can be said of our body. We have a body, we have a mind. We're constantly using them, constantly doing things, and we really don't understand either of them and their relationship very well. Yeah. But especially our mind, we don't understand because our whole field of knowledge is focused outside. Yeah. It's amazing. In the Buddha Dharma, the mind is defined as that which is clarity and cognizance. Okay, this is something I want to make a correction in the next. Can one of you start a correction file? Okay, and note this on page 19. The mind, it should say the mind is defined as that which is clarity and cognizance. Okay. Clarity indicates that unlike the body, the mind is not material. Clarity also indicates that when the mind meets certain conditions, it is able to reflect objects like a clear mirror. Due to its quality of cognizance, it can engage with or cognize that object. Yeah. So when you think about this ability to cognize objects, this thing of clarity and cognizance, it's phenomenal. And how, where did it come from? And what is it? Because it's totally unlike material, Material objects can't attain awakening. Material objects cannot generate love and compassion. Material objects cannot become wise. I don't care about AI, you know? Robots are not, they are material objects. They are not going to have wisdom and compassion. They can do behavior that makes them look good, but behavior that makes them look a certain way is very different than having a consciousness that is endowed with those qualities. Okay? Yeah, I find it so sad, when you hear people, they talk to their phone and Cortana or Alexa, answers them. And it's like, yeah. No, they've really seen now that many people who are suicidal, sometimes they'll say something to their phone, and now they're realizing they have to program the phones so that if somebody says, I feel like killing myself, that, Siri and Cortana and Alexa say, oh, if you feel suicidal, here, call this number, they can help you. To get the phone to say that, because people talk to their phones. Yeah. And they feel cut off from actual human beings and contact with actual human beings. That's really sad, isn't it? Huh? Yeah. Yeah, yeah. But when you think about it, and you sit there and you realize, you just look at your mind and what it can do. And it's a mystery, isn't it? What is this thing that can cognize and feel? Yeah, what in the world is it? Okay. So from our own experience, we know that our mind changes from moment to moment. That quality of changeability indicates that it is under the influence of causes and conditions. Very important. Each moment of mind arises due to its own unique cause, the previous moment of mind. The mind is a continuum, a series of mind moments that we call a mind stream. Each being has his or her own mind stream. Mind streams or parts of individual mind streams do not merge. Okay, so it's not when we die that all of our mind streams go into a pool and then, some characteristic that belonged to you and some characteristic that belonged to somebody else get reshuffled and create a new person. It's not like that. It's just, within a person, one moment of clarity, of an awareness producing the next moment. And, you separate from this body, but that continuum keeps existing. Okay? And each being has his or her own mind stream. Okay? So they don't split apart, they don't merge together. Okay? Because the mind is influenced by other factors and changes in each moment, when the appropriate conditions are present, mental transformation occurs. A mind that is flooded with disturbing emotions can become one that is peaceful and joyful. Okay, so this whole thing that the mind is changing moment by moment, it never is the same thing. So if we have this idea that we're going to create ourselves as some kind of permanent person that's never going to change, that's never going to happen because the mind is continually changing moment by moment. Okay? We can condition the mind so that certain factors become more prominent and more stable. But the mind itself is in constant change, becoming something new in each moment. And what makes it become something new, what makes it something that you can't pinpoint because it's changing like that, is the fact that it arises due to causes and conditions. So it's not that there's, okay, here's the mind, you can draw a line around it, this is it, now I know what it is, I got it, yeah, it has a label, I can cut it in some parts and, do this and that. And now I can control it and it is predictable, and it is me. Yeah, here's this mind that is me. Yeah, just like it says, everybody has their own mind stream. My mind stream, it is me. It's not you. There's something in that. That's the essence of me. That's never going to change. That never can become anything else. Yeah? And that's a hallucination on our part. Yeah, that's total make-believe. And when you really think about it, it makes you feel kind of weird because we want to have something that you can draw a line around and say, this is me. That's always going to be me. That's predictably me. And there's no way we can do that. The person and the mind are not the same thing. And both are changing in each moment, and both are under the influence of other factors. Yeah, so it's impossible to, okay, I got it all under control, fixed. Yeah, immovable now. Yeah. Of course, we want to condition the mind so that we have simply the causes and conditions that will produce happiness. But that doesn't entail, stifling everything in a single moment of mind and not letting it change. Yeah. Or thinking that there's some essence of meanness in this mind. Yeah. Just as, when you look at the body, like, you're looking at your sister's body, there's no person in there. You look at the mind, there's no person in there either. Yeah. But you say, but I have all these mental qualities. They make up what is me. Well, they may be attributes of you, but they are not you. And they're things that change also. So how can they be the essence of you? Okay, so really, thinking deeply about this, just watching how the mind is changing, all these moments of cognizance, it's really mysterious. Yeah. The mind has two natures. Its conventional nature, which is how it functions and relates to other things, and its ultimate nature, its actual mode of existence. The conventional nature, its clarity and cognizance, may be compared to pure water that is free from contaminants. When dirt is mixed into this water, its pure nature is obscured, although it is still there. Sometimes the dirt is stirred up and the water is more obscured than at other times. But no matter how much dirt is in the water, it is not the nature of the water. The water can be purified and the dirt removed. Similarly, the mind is pure even when it is obscured by afflictions. Sometimes our mind is comparatively calm, and other times it is agitated by anger or attachment. These afflictions are temporary. Someone may be upset in the morning but relaxed in the afternoon. While the mind stream itself endures, anger is not always present in it. This is because anger and other afflictions have not entered the nature of the mind. Okay, so another analogy is the sky and clouds. You know, the nature of the sky is always open and spacious, but clouds obscure that nature. We can't see it, but the clouds are not the nature of the sky. The clouds can be dispersed, and the nature of the sky can be revealed to us, although it's been there all along. Okay? So same thing with this pure nature of the mind. The mind may be colored by different emotions at different times. Anger and loving kindness are opposite. They cannot be manifest in our mind at the same time, although they may arise at different times. Yeah. And when you really look at a person, we think people are consistent. But when you really look, we are composed of all sorts of contradictory factors that are one totally inconsistent with another. Yeah, we have anger, we have fortitude, we have love, we have hate, we have attention, we have fogginess. Yeah, we have energy, we have laziness. I mean, we are made up of so many different contradictory elements. Yeah, don't you think? Do you feel like you're a consistent human being who is predictable? Forget we are anything but predictable. Huh? Yeah, totally smooth. Yes, we know you. Totally smooth. Yeah, never waves. Yeah. Yeah. Just wait till you work in the kitchen with her. Yeah, we really, when you think about it, we're totally unpredictable in many ways. Yeah, totally contradictory. Yeah, one day there's a situation, we interpret it this day. Next day, the same situation, we interpret it totally another way. Yeah. Okay. Even people such as Hitler or Stalin, who had great hatred, felt love for their family members and children. Yeah, you can't say anybody is 100% evil. You cannot say that about any living being. Let me tell you a story. I'm reading this book by Father Boyle. What's his first name? Gregory Boyle. Yeah, and so he's a Catholic priest, and he spends a lot of time working with gang members. And so he was saying in his book, the one I'm reading now is Barking to the Choir. And he was saying that sometimes he is called to be a witness in a death penalty case in court, because he works with the gang members. And there was one time, one prosecutor was saying, what do you call, somebody who does, and gave gruesome details about the crime. And Father Boyle, or the kids call him G for Gregory, G said, oh, they must have really been suffering to do something so awful like that. And then the prosecutor again said, and what do you have to say about don't you think that somebody who does na 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 is evil? And Father G says, imagine what he must have experienced as a child that he thought doing that would solve his problems. So the prosecutor kept asking him questions, trying to get him to say that somebody was evil. And Father G wouldn't do it. And finally, the prosecutor looks at him and says, Father, if you don't talk about evil, what do you talk about on Sunday morning? And Father G said, love. Now, he would not go there to say any other living being is evil, and neither would somebody who's a Buddhist who understands about the mind. There's no way we can say any person is evil. Yeah? People do horrible actions. That does not make them evil people. And I remember this question came up so often. People would say, but Lama, isn't Adolf Hitler the epitome of evil? And Lama would say, he loved his family, didn't he? Wasn't he nice to some people? And of course, nobody wanted to hear that. So they ask another question. But, Lama stayed quite firm. There is no evil living being. And I think that's very important for us to be able, when we look at any other living being, to know that nobody is evil by nature. And when we look at ourselves, to say we aren't evil or shameful or inadequate or whatever it is by nature either. Okay? There's just a mind with all sorts of different qualities percolating in it. And some of those qualities we can nourish, water those seeds, watch them grow, and other qualities we can starve a bit and watch them dry up. Yeah? But no mind is inherently afflicted and evil, and no person is inherently afflicted or evil. Yeah, be it ourselves or anybody else. Okay, so this too is a big difference in the way, we see things from the way society often sees things. Where people are labeled as evil, or people are called names, or, given called one name or assigned one attribute, and then we think we know everything about them. And that just displays our own ignorance. So we may kind of joke sometimes, so we like to, at least I like to make fun of politicians. I don't know about everybody else, but I have to laugh. Otherwise I cry. Yeah. So I like to make fun. And, sometimes you say, oh, so-and-so's a dimwit. Okay. But they're not a dimwit. Yeah. There's a mind stream that is clear and cognizant, just like my mind stream that's clear and cognizant. I have 84,000 afflictions, so do they. I may have different ones stronger than they do, and they have different ones stronger than I do, but it's not that one of us has 83,999 afflictions and the other one has 84,000. It's not like that. Yeah. Okay. The fact that the mind can be dominated by anger at one time and by an opposite emotion, such as love, at another, indicates that the emotions are not in the nature of the mind. The mind itself is pure. It is like colorless water that can be colored by a variety of hues or by none at all. Our body is like a house, and the mind is its inhabitant. As long as the body remains, the mind is a long-term resident. However, various mental factors, which include emotions and attitudes, are like visitors. One day resentment comes, another day compassion comes, but neither remains very long. While both are visitors, one visitor is respectful, useful, and pleasant, like someone reliable whom we can trust and want to make a member of the family. We invite that visitor to remain in the house all the time and cultivate the conditions so that she will. Meanwhile, the other visitor is rude and disturbs our own and others' peace. We don't want him to visit, let alone move in. So we do not invite him and evict him if he sneaks in. Similarly, it is possible to banish anger and cultivate compassion limitlessly, making it our constant companion. So I heard once somebody used the example of the mind can be like a room with one chair, okay? And so if anger is sitting in that chair, love, compassion, other ones can't. But if you make sure the compassion is in that chair, then even anger comes to call, it can't stay. There's no place for it to sit down. Okay. Yeah. So the thing is to cultivate our mind and cultivate the conditions so that the mental qualities that are useful and beneficial will stay in the mind and become more prominent. And those that are obnoxious, if they try and come in, there's nowhere for them to sit down. Okay, the ultimate nature of the mind is its emptiness of independent or inherent existence. Inherent existence is a false mode of existence that we superimpose on all phenomena. We believe that they have their own findable essence that makes them what they are, that they exist independently of all other factors, such as their causes and their parts. In fact, they are empty of all such fabricated ways of existing because they exist dependent on other factors. In the 8,000-line Perfection of Wisdom Sutra, the Buddha said, "The mind is devoid of mind, for the nature of mind is clear light." The mind is devoid of mind. This leads us to investigate what the mind actually is, its ultimate mode of existence, how it really exists. The mind refers to the clear and cognizant conventional nature of the mind. Okay, but the mind is devoid of mind is getting us to think about the ultimate nature of the mind. When we search that clear and cognizant nature, we cannot find something that is the mind. Within the clarity and cognizance, there is nothing we can pinpoint that is inherently the mind. If we were able to find a real mind, then the mind would inherently exist with its own independent essence. However, when we search to find the mind, we do not find the mind in the mind. When we search the mind with ultimate analysis, we do not find an inherently existent mind. Okay. That is why it says here that the mind is devoid of mind. The final nature of the mind, its ultimate mode of existence, is its emptiness of inherent existence. Since the mind is devoid of mind, we might think that the mind does not exist at all. But this is not the case. The words, the mind, indicate that the mind exists. Otherwise, if something's non-existent, we wouldn't have any words to talk about it. Okay, but this is not the case. The words, the mind indicates that the mind exists. It is the basis of our analysis. That the mind exists is shown by the fact that I can explain these statements due to the workings of my mind, and you can understand them due to the workings of your mind. Saying that the mind does not abide in the mind means that an inherently existent mind is not the final mode of existence of the mind. It does not mean that the mind does not exist at all. Okay? So it means that some kind of findable essence that is the mind does not exist in the mind. We talk about the mind, we talk about clarity and cognizance, but when we go to locate exactly what the mind is, we can't put our finger on it at all. Just like if you look at the table, you say, oh, I put my finger on the table, that's the table. Okay, that's looking at the conventional way of looking at things. But if you ask, what really is the table? When we say table, what really is it that we're referring to? Yeah. What really makes this thing a table? What's really the essence of a table? And if we start looking, all these parts, all these characteristics, can we put our finger on one thing and say that's the table? If I'm looking for the real thing that is the table, I can't just put my finger here and say that's the table. Because my finger is actually on, a few, maybe 1 or 2 square centimeters of wood. And you can't say those few square centimeters of wood are a table. So then you say, okay, this is the table. But actually, this is just one piece of wood. Piece of wood isn't a table. Then you try and say, well, this is the table. But that's the side of a table, and a side of a table isn't a table. So you start looking everywhere to find out, what really is a table? What does that word table really refer to? Is there some object with an essence that is the table? And, everything we point to, none of it is a table. Okay. So when we investigate with ultimate analysis, the table is unfindable. The table cannot bear analysis. When we don't analyze, somebody says, please put this on the table, and you can put it on the table. But if you're holding this and someone says, please put it on the table, and you start looking, well, what exactly is the table? Where do I put this? What exactly does the word table refer to? Then you're going to be standing there holding this for a really long time because you can't figure out where the table is that you should put it on. Okay? Because under analysis, it disappears. Yeah, it disappears. Did you ever see that movie where they have 2 people sitting in a boat, and the camera goes out, and and they become smaller and smaller and disappear, or then the camera goes in to into them, and you start seeing the limbs, and then the cells, and then all these things. Whether you go out and big or in and small, can you find a person anywhere? Can you find a body anywhere? Yeah, you can. The mind exists, but it is empty of inherent existence. This is the meaning of the nature of mind as clear light. The ultimate nature of the mind is pure, in that it is free from inherent existence. But the fact that the mind is empty of inherent existence alone does not mean the afflictions such as ignorance, anger, and attachment can be eliminated from it. These afflictions also lack inherent existence, but we cannot say they are pure by nature. Ignorance is a mental factor. So just thinking the mind is not inherently existent, that alone cannot prove that the afflictions can be eliminated from it. Okay? We have to show that the afflictions have not entered into the nature of the mind. Okay. So ignorance is a mental factor that grasps phenomena as inherently existent with their own independent essences. It is the source of all other disturbing emotions, such as anger, craving, jealousy, and conceit. The fact that the mind, as well as all other phenomena, do not exist inherently means that the ignorance that grasps the mind as inherently existent contradicts reality. Okay? If the mind did exist inherently, ignorance would be a correct mind that sees reality. In that case, it could not be eliminated. However, since ignorance perceives the opposite of reality, it can be eliminated by the wisdom that sees reality correctly, the wisdom that realizes the emptiness of inherent existence. Because ignorance and other afflictions are erroneous mental factors that lack an inherently existent foundation, they are not embedded in the nature of the mind and can be eliminated forever. Just as clouds temporarily obscure the open sky, although they are not the nature of the sky, ignorance and other afflictions temporarily obscure the pure nature of the mind. But unlike clouds, which once gone can reappear, ignorance and afflictions, once they have been eliminated from their root by wisdom, can no longer obscure the mind. Meanwhile, other mental factors, such as love, compassion, and fortitude, do not depend on ignorance to exist, and therefore remain as part of our mind stream forever. Okay, and then there's a reflection. So that reflection is your homework. Yeah, think about it between now and then, and be prepared to answer some questions. Okay, so we have a few minutes for questions, if you have any.
We had sharing Dharma Day in our discussion, I think when Manjikma was leading it, and then one question was, why is self-compassion more difficult than having compassion with others?
Why is compassion
self-compassion more difficult than having compassion with others?
Yeah.
And I was thinking, because we are constantly focused on the outside world, we are more habituated, and then also the culture is teaching us, like Christianity, to treat your neighbors.
Mm-hmm.
How is this going? I'm not grown-up Christian, but as yourself. But I heard actually that the as yourself is undermined. So actually, it's expected to treat others more importantly than yourself. Yeah, I just wanted to, but because you have been sharing in the very beginning that we are so habituated to just be out there. The outside world
Yeah.
is so much important.
Yeah. And we're very habituated with criticizing ourselves. And we're told to criticize ourselves. Yeah. And we're actually told many things that are not true. You know, we're told that if you're selfish, you're bad. You're a bad person if you're selfish. And we're told that. We all were told that, weren't we, when we were little? If you're selfish, you're a bad person. Yeah. Does being selfish mean you're a bad person? Does that make you bad through and through, 100%, no good qualities at all? No. But we were taught that, and we believed it, and we still believe it. Yeah. So we have to identify all these kinds of beliefs and conditioning that we've had and be able, investigate them with wisdom and see that they're just things that are made up. They aren't true. Yeah. Even things that we're very, very familiar with. Yeah. Just because we've known it for a long time doesn't make it true.
A question online.
Mm-hmm.
Could you please further explain the terms purify and a purified mind? When you are purifying past actions, are you actually purifying your present mind so that it thinks differently when a similar situation arises? And when this finally happens, that you think differently, is this a sign that you have purified?
Okay. So when you're purifying negative karma, you're inhibiting the seeds of those actions from ripening. Okay, so you apply the 4 opponent powers, and one of the opponent powers is having regret, and another one is making the determination not to do the action again. So those are 2 of the 4. So to really have regret, we have to understand, why did I do that? What really was motivating me? What did I think I was going to get out of acting that way? Yeah. So we have to really understand how our mind works. What mental factors were there, what thoughts were there, how we followed different thoughts and then acted on them. And then to make a determination not to do that again, we have to develop some other way of thinking that will counteract that old habitual, useless way of thinking. So you have to really think about, otherwise you just say, oh, I won't do it again, but you haven't made any preparation. The next time it comes up, you do it again, because that's what you're used to. So to really truthfully say, I'll try not to do that again, then you have to really think about, okay, well, this is what got me into this situation. And so how was that way of thinking faulty? How was that motivation faulty? And what would be a correct motivation? And how, if a similar situation came up, could I look at that situation in a totally different way so that I would have a different motivation and act in a different way? Yeah. So to really purify, we have to develop all that kind of understanding. So purification, it's not like an on and off light switch. It's something that happens gradually, that grows gradually. Yeah. Yeah, so it's not, again, it's not like school and it's like, okay, I need to purify this, and this. Okay, I did 100 Vajrasattva, took care of that one. Well, No, it depends. What were you doing while you recited 100 Vajrasattva mantra? What in the world were you thinking? You know, there's many different ways to recite a mantra. Okay? So, you know, these kinds of things are not just like simple stuff that you check off like that. Okay, got that karma done. Now, we chip away at things. Okay. Okay. Yeah.
On page 21, it's talking about the ultimate nature of the mind. It says the ultimate nature of the mind is pure in that it is free from inherent existence.
Uh-huh.
And then in that same paragraph, it says these afflictions also lack inherent existence, but we cannot say they are pure by nature. I'm curious about that.
Yeah, it's an interesting statement, isn't it? So what he's saying is just saying that something lacks inherent existence doesn't make it pure in the sense that you want to keep it hanging around. Okay? Because the afflictions are also empty of inherent existence. But that doesn't mean that they vanish instantaneously. It doesn't mean that you want to keep them hanging around. Okay? Because they're really they're a big nuisance. Yeah? So he's kind of saying, you know, just the emptiness of inherent existence alone isn't sufficient. Yeah? We have to show that, you know, because ignorance is empty of inherent existence too. But then he went into that whole discussion of how ignorance is a totally unrealistic mind. So empty or not empty, if it's unrealistic, it's not going to serve our purpose. Yeah. So we need to see that it's not realistic, and then we also need to ascertain that it's not part, and to see that because it doesn't apprehend reality correctly, therefore it can't be an inherent part of the mind. Yeah, it can't be embedded in the nature of the mind.
I'm not sure I can remember. But you said there was a change on page 19.
Oh, yeah. I wanted to say the definition of mind is that which is clear and cognizant. I let the that which is omitted, and it needs to be in there.
And then I guess to follow up on the question about purification. So it seems to me that I kind of sometimes rationalize that if something is not bothering me and therefore maybe I've resolved it or purified it, that I actually have purified it.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think that's necessarily true for me.
Yeah. It's true for everybody.
Oh.
If it's not bothering you at that moment, great, don't worry about it. Don't make it bother you. But don't assume that it's gone forever either. Okay? It's like with the knapweed, you know? You pull the knapweed out, and then it looks so beautiful. And yeah, if it looks beautiful, don't go plant any knapweed in it. But don't assume that the knapweed's not going to come back. Okay. Yeah, so when your mind's peaceful, enjoy it. And know that it's possible to have a peaceful mind. But also know that until we've uprooted the ignorance, these other afflictions, you know, will arise when the causes and conditions for them come together. Yeah, because again, they don't arise just haphazardly out of nowhere. There's always causes and conditions behind them.